Hi, everyone. We're just going to give another minute or so for folks to join, and then we'll get started with our webinar today. All right, I think we can get started. Welcome, everyone. Thanks so much for joining this latest in our 7-part series on our FICURE webinar series. My name's Elio Evangelista. I'm a senior consultant here at ZoomRx. I'm here to continue this series on the brand builder framework, the FICURE framework. If you missed the first 3 webinars in this series, we can certainly provide you links to view those if you just reach out. The content that I'll be going over is drawn from ZoomRx's brand builder solution and our FICURE strategic framework, which I'll go into in a little bit more detail here in a moment. This is the 4th part of the thought leadership series on building your brand from development to launch. We're going to be talking about competitive landscape research today. You'll also hear me refer to it as competitive set research from time to time, and it's just an interchangeable term that I'll be using. So the goal of this and our other webinars in this series is to move from gathering insights to developing impactful brand strategies. In terms of our agenda today, I'll start going over a little bit about the FICURE framework and give you an introduction to that. That should help ground you in some of the perspectives that I'll be sharing today. I'm also going to walk through some of the competitive landscape solutions that we've been able to bring to brands and why they're so successful. Lastly, I'll talk a little bit about the FICURE beta tool that we're rolling out, how that works, and leave some time at the end for Q&A. Please feel free to submit your questions in the Q&A panel as we go along, but I'll definitely take a look at that at the end of our discussion. So as I mentioned, I'm a senior consultant here at ZoomRx. I'm part of the Brand Builder Solutions team. I won't spend too much time on this slide, just to say that I spent my career supporting biopharma teams across different functions, from medical affairs and compliance to commercial, marketing, and brand teams. And what I'd like to say is just that through the Brand Builder solution, we primarily support brands as they approach launch. We help them develop actionable plans for launch based on the insights we collect through strategic market research. So today's content is drawn from our Brand Builder solution. Brand Builder is ZoomRx's solution for optimizing biopharma brand launch. It's an insight solution backed up by ZoomRx's proprietary technology. Brand Builder is always customized for our clients' brands' unique needs, their budgets, their timelines, and it's always driven by the brand strategy. FICURE itself is the framework we're going to draw upon to help build successful launches, and that's the framework that I'll talk to you now about. If you haven't participated in this webinar series before, FICURE is an acronym. You see what it stands for below. Today, I'll be focusing on the C component of the acronym, that's competitive landscape. But I'll quickly go over the different solutions here for you. The P stands for patient target research. When we do patient target research, we're looking at what characteristics identify patients who are good candidates for your brand. Similarly, in the HCP target research, we're looking at those characteristics that identify the physicians most likely to prescribe in higher volumes. The YES journey looks at decision milestones and influencers that shape behavioral prescriptions and compliance decisions. Today, what we'll be looking at is, what other treatments do target HCPs consider for target patients when making prescription decisions. When we're looking at unmet needs, the question we're looking to answer is what functional and emotional needs are not sufficiently met by competitors. And then those last two, rational benefits and emotional benefits, are sort of two sides of the same coin. One, we're looking at the unique and relevant functional outcomes for target patients and physicians. And with emotional benefits, we're looking at the relevant emotional outcomes that those target patients and HCPs are looking for. So our perspective here at ZoomRx is that if a brand can confidently answer these key questions across these 7 dimensions, that's going to lead to a more successful launch. It happens to work out nicely that competitive landscape research is sort of positioned in the middle of this 5-Cure framework because it really touches on all of the other aspects of the framework. You'll hear me talk today about how competitive set research influences all of the other dimensions here on the screen and how those dimensions influence competitive landscape research as well. So as I said, we're focusing on that C component today. And the key question that we'll be exploring is how can brand teams and insights professionals understand the decision milestones and influencers that shape behavioral outcome? To put that more plainly, how does the target audience for a brand make a decision on which product to use or which to prescribe? So thinking about what we're looking at in competitive landscape research, those decisions will be made based on how well the brands are differentiated in the market. So that's going to be a theme that you hear today is differentiation. It's all about setting the brand apart and creating that differentiation from existing therapies in use today. So to me, the question of how brands differentiate themselves in the market touches on all aspects of the 5-Cure 7 dimensions, which I'll point out throughout the presentation today. But also, competitive set research addresses this list of key business questions that you might ask yourself if you're supporting a brand team, if you're on the brand team, if you're an insights professional. Thinking about what shapes patient and HCP decisions can be broken down by these questions. So under opportunity assessment, the key phrase in that question really is the target patient. In order for us to define the competitive landscape, we need to understand the patient type for which everyone else is competing. If you've been attending or listening to these recordings of our previous webinars, you'll start to see how these different dimensions fold into each other and influence. You can't lose context of that target patient as you're going through competitive landscape research. And even in cases where there's a first to market product, the competitor maybe is not another product, it's often just sticking with the status quo. And that's an important point to understand about the competitive landscape. So yes, you can have a fantastic novel product hitting the market, but you have to consider how those patients are currently being treated. It's about the perception of that status quo treatment. And from those target patients that we need to identify, we can better understand what drives them to seek treatment, stay on treatment, or seek a different treatment. Similarly, when it comes to HCPs, what motivates them? We need to ask and understand what drives their decisions to choose a treatment in the first place. And then what's pushing healthcare providers to consider other treatments throughout the patient's journey? I'll dive into the bottom 4 questions in a lot more detail throughout the presentation today, but suffice it to say that these key questions help take what you learn from competitive landscape research and shape the brand strategy and execution of that strategy. And we'll go over how competitive landscape research addresses unmet needs or that white space where competing products don't exist and where brands can start to position themselves. We'll also look at how brands test their messages against competitors to identify compelling reasons for the audience to choose one product over another. I'll talk about how the audience perceives brands and why those brand personalities drive prescription decisions. And throughout the presentation, I'll also highlight why it's important for brands to identify their unique rational and emotional benefits relative to their competitors. But these are all types of research that we as insights professionals do to support brands. You can see how that central question about how to differentiate brands in the competitive landscape runs through all of these key questions. So, what is competitive landscape research really about? In real estate, it's location, location, location. Similarly, in competitive set research, it's about differentiation, differentiation, differentiation. Having a brand separated from its competitors. A treatment almost always is only competing against a subset of the full set of treatments available to patients. Not all patients can take the same set of treatments. There could be safety concerns for certain patient types or possible contraindications or comorbidities to consider. So understanding what the actual decision set is really important, and it's also harder to determine than that would seem. Another key component of competitive landscape research is addressing the unmet needs that are currently not addressed by competing products. There's always a set of needs, especially in the market where a product has yet to be launched. Looking at other treatments or other options that patients have to address those similar needs helps us identify the competitive set. So sometimes we'll hear that the need is less about treating the condition and is instead about proving patients' quality of life or the convenience of their treatment regimen. And then finally, that final bullet, identifying what's unique and differentiated both from a rational and emotional standpoint. What rational benefits does the product provide? Sometimes you can think of these as clinical benefits. Is it efficacy? Is it safety? And then what emotional benefits does the product provide to meet patients' needs? Does the patient's life improve in any meaningful way because of this medicine, beyond just those clinical benefits? There's definitely a positioning component to understanding and acting on the competitive set. Having a differentiated positioning relative to the competitive set is probably the biggest early step that brands need to make before they build towards launch success. Other key aspects of the brand strategy that get impacted by understanding the competitive landscape include forecasting and market sizing, brand messaging, brand personality, messaging, and message execution. All of these I'm going to start touching upon now. So let's start with positioning. And positioning is about defining the choice set that the brand needs to differentiate from. So if you think about how you construct a positioning statement, first you start with who the target HCP is. Then you identify who the target patient is. And from there, you can back into the competitive set. When conducting positioning research, we usually ask, how unique is this statement? What we really need to be thinking about, though, is how unique is this compared to what? So sometimes it's unique to all other treatments available. Sometimes it's unique to a specific competitor product or set of products within the overall landscape. So to the extent to which we can start positioning research, knowing what the competitive set is, it makes us more effective at honing in on the product's unique rational and emotional benefits. Something else that we study through the lens of competitive landscape research is how to determine the size of the market and how that size will change over time. So just understanding market share in a way that's realistic. When you think about forecasting, if you work in the biopharma industry or you work in market research, or maybe you just use market research for forecasting on your own, you can develop strong forecasting model through sophisticated choice exercises. Having a realistic choice exercise for forecasting starts with a realistic choice set that they're selecting from. Additionally, understanding the opportunity for a product relative to its competitive set is important so brand teams can guide resource allocation decisions. A lot of that is based on what the opportunity is relative to the competitive landscape. That opportunity assessment is based on inputs from competitive set research. Things like script allocations and the assumptions behind those script allocations allow brand teams to hone in on who the brand is really competing with. From positioning, you start to move into messaging. When thinking about your brand positioning, you start to develop and test messages that support that positioning. Our perspective here at ZoomerX is that messages that work best are those that win the hearts and minds of the target audience. So you want to establish the unique rational and emotional benefits for physicians and patients relative to competitor products. On that earlier slide about positioning, I talked about finding differentiators to identify your brand's positioning. As you think about your brand attributes as differentiators, you want to make sure that you're not conflating those with just table stakes attributes. And by table stakes attributes, I mean, what are the things that every brand needs to have for HCPs to consider prescribing the drug in the first place, or for patients to consider taking the drug. We'll often hear in research that efficacy is the most important thing when determining which drug to use, and that's often true. Um, but you have to be careful not to interpret that as needing to position yourself or position the brand on efficacy. If you're at parity with the competitive landscape on efficacy, but your strongest differentiator is a different attribute, such as safety or more convenient dosing, that provides you a stronger positioning relative to the competitive set. And that's what you can start to develop messages on. So there are times even when identifying the similarities between your product and your competitors is helpful. So identifying those similar competitors is important, and then finding your differentiators off of those similarities. Doing that gives you something to anchor your positioning and your messaging off of. Your product has similar efficacy to product X, but yours is the safer product. And that's something that you can emphasize in your messaging. Or maybe your product has the more convenient dosing than another competitor. That can be a key differentiator that once HCPs hear that message, they start to consider prescribing your drug. Positioning and messaging tend to be more functional, whereas brand personality is a lot less defined. It's more emotional, and you're looking to identify the differentiated or unique attributes within a fixed set. That's why we'll often present Jungian archetypes such as the hero or the jester or the sage for respondents to choose between when they're looking at different brands or brand options. You might have exercises where respondents associate brands with historical figures such as Einstein or Oprah or Rasputin. Having a fixed set of competitors allows for that differentiation because we're identifying the unique aspects within that unique set. And in an ideal world, especially with qualitative research, you can go beyond those comparisons and understand why the audience associates a brand with Mother Teresa, for example. You ask questions like, how do you feel about this historical figure? How are those feelings about the brand consistent with your feelings about the historical figure? You use these projective techniques to uncover latent perceptions beyond just the surface level rational or emotional perceptions. Um, and it's easy for a respondent to say, well, brand X is safe. That's why I like brand X. But these projective exercises in competitive landscape research, we can use those to uncover that not only is brand X safe, but it's also trustworthy. It's a product that we put up on a pedestal compared to other products. One thing to keep in mind when you're doing these types of exercises is to use a diverse set of personality types. Different genders and well-known figures internationally. Using those will help to present a representative group for all respondents to compare the competitive set. Let's go over a few ways that we can take what we learn in competitive landscape research and apply those to message execution. So looking at a couple of the tangible methods that brands execute their messages. We have creative concepts. Using creative concepts, brands are looking to break through the noise or the clutter in the marketplace to differentiate themselves from competitors. So they're developing creative concepts that capture the audience's attention. And they want concepts that have a lot of stopping power relative to their competitors' concepts. Also, they're looking to develop a concept that differentiates their brand within the marketplace. And when I say differentiation with creative concepts, it's really differentiation visually, so that's stopping power, but also presenting a differentiated message in terms of the unique rational and emotional benefits for the product. So when you're doing creative concept testing and you ask the audience how unique the concept is or how well it captures your eye, you have to think back to that question, relative to what? Relative to which competitor, which set of competitors? Is the concept unique or different enough from what you've already seen in the marketplace. And that's where the competitive set comes in. Is the concept differentiating your brand from your competitor's concept? The other aspect of message execution is often in the brand's customer visual aid or interactive visual aid. And with the Viz aid that the sales team uses, brand teams will want to train them to set up the competitive set so that they can get, as they get into the detail, they can begin to point out the competitive differences. So competitive selling is tricky when you don't have head-to-head trials, but reps are trained to address this. For example, a rep can ask a doctor, if you think about patient Smith, what would you prescribe to the patient? And then they respond with, okay, well, if you think about my product, what are some of the differences from what you might prescribe today versus my product? So in CVA research, you want to help identify ways to frame the competitive set so that throughout the detail, the reps are able to differentiate the products. As you think about tools that brand teams can use coming out of competitive landscape research, here are a couple of helpful blueprints. The first is perceptual mapping. This is a pretty classic 2x2. It's a tool where you can use quantitative inputs and plot them against multiple dimensions, and you get an idea of where the different brands in the competitive landscape fall. And you can do this qualitatively as well. You pick a couple of dimensions that are most important to plot a brand perception against in that matrix. So what we're really looking for with this matrix is that white space. If there are a lot of highly effective treatments, is that white space more present in safety or is it in dosing? Where is the opportunity in the competitive landscape for the brand to succeed where there aren't any other brands that exist? And then there's the classic landscape audit. There's a lot of different ways that you can do this type of audit. You may see this where you're auditing functional or emotional perceptions. Creative agencies can do a creative audit to look at the competitive set and analyze what are all the different brands saying. They can analyze the look and feel of all the different campaigns for those different brands. The way I've laid this slide out, it's just to conduct a landscape audit along the lines of the 7 FICURE dimensions. That's just a really nice way to provide a quick snapshot of the competitive landscape and how it lines up along these strategic dimensions. So if there's anything I'd like you to take away from this webinar, it's these 3 points. Number one, above all, competitive landscape research is about identifying key differentiators for the brand compared to either all other competitors, a subset of what's available, or one specific product on the market. Additionally, competitive set research impacts so much of the brand strategy. And in the case of FICURE, it impacts all other strategic dimensions in that FICURE framework. And then lastly, by researching the competitive set, you develop a strong positioning that filters down to your messaging and message execution. So that brings this presentation to a close. Feel free to submit any questions you might have in the Q&A box. I'll pick them up and answer what I can in the time remaining. And I don't see any questions so far. In the meantime, if any come in, I do want to invite all of our attendees and registrants today to participate in our beta test for the FICURE tool. The FICURE framework is a great tool for insights professionals to map out what the organization knows today. You can see in those columns, it's designed to help you develop the current hypotheses about the brand across these 7 dimensions. And it also helps identify gaps and questions that need to be addressed that you can pull in when developing a research plan for the brand. We're also developing a tool to help brand teams address these hypotheses and key questions. If you're interested in participating in the beta test, we're eager to have some willing testers. And if you have additional questions or you'd like me to reach me directly, here's my contact information. You can email me at leo.evangelista@zoomrx.com. Feel free to reach out if you have insights or research questions, or if you just want to chat about brand launch. Um, and I look forward to hearing from you and keeping in touch.